He invited his ex-wife to his wedding just to watch her break. But when the doors opened and a red dress stepped out of a Bentley, every whisper in the room died. Because the woman he once threw away came back richer, calmer, and ready to remind him what real power looks like. The gold envelope shimmered under the afternoon light, so out of place in Nia Carter's small, dim apartment that it almost glowed with arrogance. She turned it over twice, feeling its weight. The paper was thick, expensive, and cold, like a man's ego wrapped in luxury. Her name was written in cursive ink, black and elegant. Ms. Nia Carter. The same handwriting that once wrote "I love you" on napkins. The same hand that promised forever. She hesitated before opening it, a quiet voice whispering, "Don't do this to yourself." But curiosity was a cruel companion. She slid a finger under the seal and unfolded the invitation. "Ethan Caldwell and Clara Whitmore invite you to celebrate their union." Her stomach turned. The words burned themselves into her mind like a brand. Ethan Caldwell, her ex-husband. Clara Whitmore, the woman he swore was just a co-worker. The gold edges of the paper caught the sunlight as if mocking her. Her hand shook. Around her, the apartment was silent except for the faint drip of the kitchen faucet and the hum of an old refrigerator. A stack of unpaid bills sat on the counter beside an untouched cup of coffee. She dropped the card, like it might sting. 5 years ago, she'd been Mrs. Caldwell. They had built dreams together, brick by brick. His startup, her design firm, their plans for a family. Now she was sitting in a one-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of Atlanta, while he prepared to marry a woman whose family owned a vineyard and had the governor's number on speed dial. The betrayal still tasted metallic in her mouth. Nia leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. A water stain in the shape of a heart mocked her from above. "What kind of man does this?" she whispered. "Invites the woman he broke to his wedding." There was no one to answer. She thought of the tabloids, those awful headlines that followed their divorce. Billionaire tech CEO leaves angry black wife for model. They made her sound like a stereotype, like a bitter footnote in a man's success story. And the comments, she'd read them all, even when she promised she wouldn't. She should have known her place. She looks like she has an attitude. No wonder he left. She remembered how Ethan had handled it, how he'd smiled in interviews, the golden boy, saying, "Sometimes people just grow apart." He grew into luxury. She grew into silence. The invitation sat there like a day. "Come watch me live the life you were never enough for." Nia laughed once, short, sharp, hollow. "You really think you won, don't you?" She picked up her cracked phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found her cousin's name. Leona was the only person who still checked on her. "Nia, guess who's getting married?" "Leona, if it's Ethan, I'll drive down there and slash tires." "Nia, him, and the side chick." "Leona, you better not go." "Nia, oh, I'm going." Her finger hovered over the send button before pressing it. The truth was, she didn't know why she wanted to go. Maybe to prove something. Maybe to see if he'd even flinch when he saw her. Or maybe to show the world that the angry black wife was still standing, gracefully, beautifully, dangerously standing. Nia stood and walked to the cracked mirror hanging on her wall. It had followed her from apartment to apartment like an old witness to her life. Her reflection stared back. Eyes that had cried too much, skin dulled by stress, curls pulled back in a messy bun. She didn't look like the woman she once was, the one who wore designer heels to charity galas and smiled beside Ethan in business magazines. But beneath the tired eyes, there was something new. Steel. Her gaze shifted to her closet. 3 dresses hung inside like ghosts of different versions of herself. One black, safe and invisible. One torn, the hem frayed from a night she'd rather forget. And one red. The red dress was bold. It was confidence in fabric form. Ethan used to say it made her look too much. That was his favorite phrase. Too loud, too emotional, too sensitive, too black. She reached out and touched the red silk, letting her fingers slide down the seam. Maybe too much was exactly what the moment called for. Her phone buzzed again. Leona had replied. "Leona, you're not going there to get revenge, right?" "Nia, no. I'm going there to remind him what he lost." She smiled faintly. a smile that didn't reach her eyes but hinted at something brewing underneath. Something dangerous. Outside, the sky darkened. A storm had been building all day, clouds heavy with unspoken rage. Rain began tapping against the window, soft at first, then harder, like the world agreeing with her anger. She went to the kitchen sink, picked up the invitation, and held it over the small blue flame of a lighter. The fire caught fast, curling the edges, eating away at the fancy script. "See you at your wedding, Ethan," she whispered. Ash fell into the sink, floating like gray butterflies before disappearing down the drain. Nia turned off the light, sat on her bed, and stared into the dark. Her mind replayed the years, the love, the manipulation, the slow erasure of who she was. She had once believed Ethan saw her as his equal, but he'd seen her as a trophy, a rebellion against his father's country club rules. The successful white man's beautiful black wife, something to show, not to cherish. He'd turned her into his statement piece, and when the novelty faded, he replaced her with someone paler, softer, easier to explain at dinner parties. But now she wasn't the same woman he discarded. She reached under her bed and pulled out a worn leather journal. Inside were pages of late-night thoughts, quotes, dreams, and letters she never sent. On the first page, she wrote, "He invited me to watch him win, but I'm coming to remind him who built his empire." Nia closed the journal and leaned back. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating her reflection in the window. For a split second, she looked powerful again, like the woman she used to be, only wiser, stronger, and far less forgiving. For the first time in years, she wasn't scared of being seen. The storm raged on, but Nia slept peacefully that night, her decision made. She would walk into that wedding not as a broken ex-wife, but as a storm dressed in red. And when Ethan saw her, he would finally understand. He hadn't just lost a woman. He'd lost the only one who ever saw him for what he truly was. Before we step deeper into Nia's story, take a second, just one, because stories like Hayes deserve to be heard. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Tap like if you've ever been underestimated, and share this with someone who needs to remember their power. Now, let's keep going. 5 years earlier, the world had seemed golden. Nia Carter still remembered that first evening in Atlanta when she met Ethan Caldwell, the man who would both build her up and break her to pieces. It was a summer rooftop event for local entrepreneurs. She'd been there to showcase her interior design work, nervous and hopeful, wearing a thrift blazer that she'd ironed twice. He was the charming young tech investor everyone whispered about, clean-cut, calm, with a kind of confidence that drew eyes and cameras alike. He noticed her first, or at least, that's how she liked to remember it. "You're the only person up here not pretending to have fun," he said with a crooked smile, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Thought I'd change that." Nia laughed. "Maybe I'm just watching the show. Everyone else looks like they are auditioning for something." He grinned, handing her a glass. "Then I guess I'm guilty too. I'm Ethan." "Nia," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was warm, his tone easy. From that moment, conversation came naturally. They talked about everything: her love for design, his startup ambitions, how both were trying to prove themselves in a city that smiled at your dreams but didn't open doors easily. By midnight, they were standing close at the edge of the rooftop, looking out over the city lights. Ethan turned to her. "You know what I like about you?" She raised an eyebrow. "You've known me 3 hours." He shrugged, half smiling. "Yeah, but most people in rooms like this talk like they're reading from a script. You don't. You're real." Nia blushed. "Real doesn't pay rent, though." He chuckled. "Maybe not yet. But one day, it will. And when it does, you'll be unstoppable." She'd never forgotten that line. It became his promise, his spell. Within a month, they were inseparable. Dinners turned into sleepovers. Sleepovers turned into mornings filled with whispered plans. Ethan showered her with attention. Late-night texts, flowers at work, weekend getaways to places she'd only seen in magazines. When his friends first met her, they smiled too wide, said things like, "You're gorgeous. I love your hair. So exotic." At first, she brushed it off. Compliments were supposed to feel good, right? But sometimes they didn't. His mother, the first time they met, had said politely, "Oh, you're Nia. You're very striking. I wasn't expecting that." That night, Nia whispered to Ethan in bed. What did she mean by that? He turned on his side, running a hand down her arm. "She's just old-fashioned. Don't take it personally." "It's not about being old-fashioned," she said quietly. "It's about respect." He sighed, kissed her forehead. "You always have to make things about race, huh?" That was the first crack. Small, dismissed, but it stayed there, a fracture waiting to grow. Still, she loved him, and love makes excuses. Ethan proposed 2 years later. Simple, intimate, just the two of them in their favorite diner. He slid a small velvet box across the table and said, "Marry me before the world realizes I don't deserve you." She cried, not because of the ring, but because for once she believed someone saw her fully. They married in a small garden ceremony. Her family danced, his family watched. The whispers were loud enough to feel. Why her? She's beautiful, but it'll never last. But Nia ignored them. She wore white, smiled through it, and told herself love was stronger than ignorance. For a while, it was. They built a life in a downtown condo overlooking the skyline. She decorated every inch herself. Warm colors, African art, soft lights that made the space feel human. He called it their oasis. Every morning, he'd say, "We're the dream team." And every night, she'd whisper, "Always." But dreams have cracks, and success sharpens them. When Ethan's company took off, he changed. Slowly, subtly, at first. He worked longer hours, started attending investor dinners she wasn't invited to. When she asked why, he'd laugh. "You'd be bored out of your mind. Just old guys talking about stocks." But one night, he came home late, his shirt smelling like perfume that wasn't his. She asked softly, "Who were you with?" He stiffened. "Are we really doing this? I just asked a question." "You sound jealous." She exhaled, calm but trembling. "Jealous would mean I still feel safe enough to compete. I'm asking because I deserve honesty." He looked away. "You're reading into everything again." "I'm not stupid, Ethan. And I'm not cheating." "Then why can't you look me in the eye?" That silence said everything. He walked out before she could finish crying. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened. He kissed her cheek and said, "Don't be so emotional. You know I love you." But love without truth is a prison, and Nia could feel the walls closing in. Weeks passed. He grew colder. She found texts on his phone once, messages from C with heart emojis. When she asked, he laughed. "Clara's my assistant. She's just playful." "Playful?" Nia repeated, voice steady but eyes sharp. "She calls you baby." "Relax, it's a joke." "It's disrespect." Ethan's tone hardened. "You really need to stop making everything a racial thing. You act like every white woman who talks to me is the enemy." Nia's voice cracked. "I act like a wife who knows what betrayal smells like." He slammed his phone on the table. "God, you're impossible sometimes." She whispered, "No, Ethan, I'm just inconvenient." That was a night he didn't come home. Days turned into weeks of silent dinners and separate beds. When he finally told her he was moving out to get space, she didn't argue. She just nodded, then said the one thing he didn't expect. "Don't come back unless you're ready to be honest." He didn't. 6 months later, she saw him on social media with Clara, laughing, glowing, the picture of success. His caption read, "New beginnings." New beginnings. As if she'd never existed. Now, sitting years later in that tiny apartment with his wedding invitation in her hands, Nia could see every moment clearly. Every time she swallowed pain to keep the peace, every time her worth was measured against whiteness, every time she was told she was too much. But she wasn't too much. She was too real for people who live behind masks. She stood before her mirror again, eyes dry now. "He wanted to erase me," she whispered. "But I'm still here." Her reflection smirked back. "Let's see if he still calls me too much when I walk through his wedding doors." She closed her eyes, remembering his first words on that rooftop. You're the only one not pretending to have fun. Now she finally understood why. Because she was never pretending. She was surviving. And this time, she wouldn't just survive. She would make them remember her name. It started with whispers, late-night calls, unreturned texts, a different cologne lingering on his shirts. Ethan had always been predictable, the kind of man who likes structure, control, and schedules. But now his calendar was a mystery, full of meetings that ran into midnight. Nia noticed the change long before she admitted it to herself. He stopped kissing her good morning. He stopped saying goodnight. He started locking his phone. At first, she told herself it was stress. His company, Cloudbridge, had just landed a huge government contract. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he just needed space. But one night, as she sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, his name flashed across the news. There he was, Ethan Caldwell, smiling for cameras at a tech conference in Miami. Standing beside him, in a fitted white dress, was Clara Whitmore. The same Clara she'd once met briefly at an office party. Polite, soft-spoken, with eyes that scanned Nia like she was a test she'd already passed. Nia stared at the photo for a long time. The caption read, Caldwell's new company face. Rising star Clara Whitmore joins leadership team. Her hands tightened around her phone. Leadership team? Ethan had never mentioned promoting her. When he got home that night, she was waiting by the window. He walked in, whistling, tossing his keys onto the counter like the man who still believed everything was fine. Hey, babe, he said casually, pulling off his jacket. You up late? Didn't feel like sleeping, she replied evenly. He froze for a split second, just long enough for her to notice, before recovering his charm. Everything okay? Nia tilted her head, voice calm but eyes cold. You were in Miami. He blinked. Yeah, you knew that. The conference. Right, she said. The one you didn't invite me to. He gave a tight smile. It wasn't that kind of event. Really? Because the photos made it look like that kind of event. His brow furrowed. Photos. She turned her phone toward him. The image of him and Clara flashed across the screen. These ones. Ethan sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Nia, you can't believe everything you see online. Then tell me what I'm seeing, she said quietly. He looked irritated now, pacing slightly. You're making a big deal out of nothing. She's part of my executive team. Your executive team doesn't have lipstick on their collars. He stopped moving. His voice dropped, sharper now. You went through my clothes. Her tone didn't waver. I picked up your laundry. The shirt smelled like perfume, not mine. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, the air between them thick with unspoken truth. Finally, he laughed, that dismissive kind of laugh men use when they want to make women feel small. You're paranoid, Nia. You always have been. Paranoid, she repeated slowly. Because I can tell when something's wrong. Because you see drama where there isn't any, he snapped. You love playing the victim. It's exhausting. Her heart cracked, not because of the words, but because of the ease with which he said them. He'd been rehearsing. Nia whispered, I'm exhausted too, Ethan. From pretending not to see what's right in front of me. He threw up his hands. What do you want from me? You want me to stop working with her? Fire her just to make you feel better. She took a step forward. I want the truth. His silence answered her. Her chest rose and fell slowly. You know what's funny? When we first met, you said you liked that I was real. You said you needed someone who didn't play games. He looked away. People change. No, Ethan. Masks slip. That was the moment it ended. Not with shouting, not with tears, but with a quiet understanding that the man standing before her wasn't the man she loved. The next morning, he didn't apologize. Instead, he left early, muttering something about a board meeting. Nia didn't call him. She didn't chase. 3 days later, she found the confirmation she didn't want. Her friend Brianna, who worked in PR, called her whispering, Girl, I don't know how to tell you this, but Ethan and Clara were spotted together in New York. Hand in hand. Nia closed her eyes. Send it. When the photo arrived, her throat tightened. Ethan and Clara were walking down Fifth Avenue, smiling like a couple straight out of an ad. By that weekend, Gossip sites had picked it up. Billionaire CEO finds new love. She wasn't mentioned by name, but everyone knew. The comments burned. She couldn't keep him. She probably scared him off. He finally upgraded. She sat on her couch, scrolling until her vision blurred, then threw her phone across the room. When Ethan came home that night, she was waiting again, calmer, colder. "You didn't even try to hide it," she said softly. He exhaled. "Nia, just tell me why." His eyes darted to the floor. "It wasn't supposed to happen. Clara understands me. That's all." "Understands you." Her voice trembled, then steadied. "I built you. I stayed when you were broke, when your brilliant ideas were just sticky notes on a wall. I believed in you when no one else did." He rubbed his temples. "You're making this about loyalty. It's not about that. Then what is it about?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "You make everything so heavy, Nia. Every conversation turns into a fight. Clara, she's just easy." The word sliced through her. She took a breath. "Easy." He didn't meet her gaze. "So that's what it is," she said. "You don't want love, you want silence. You don't want real, you want easy." Ethan turned, voice hardening. "You know what your problem is? You always play the race card. Every time someone looks at you the wrong way, it's racism. Every time someone disagrees, it's bias. I'm tired of it." Her face went still. "Race card? You mean the thing I live with every day while you get to pretend it doesn't exist?" He scoffed. "There you go again." She stepped closer, her voice calm but fierce. "You wanted a black wife when it made you look progressive. You loved the attention, the magazine features, the charity dinners. But when the novelty wore off, suddenly I was too loud, too emotional, too much." Ethan glared. "You're twisting everything." "No, Ethan," she whispered. "You are." For a long time, neither spoke. Then she said, "You can have easy, but don't ever confuse it with love." He grabbed his keys and left, slamming the door so hard the picture frame on the wall cracked. Nia stood there in silence, staring at the dent in the wall. She didn't cry. The tears had run out weeks ago. Instead, she whispered to herself, "He thinks he broke me." That night, she packed a small suitcase and moved out. The media storm hit days later. Headlines called her jealous, unstable, ungrateful. A few outlets even suggested Ethan had left because she was difficult. No one cared about the truth. In their eyes, she was the angry black ex-wife, the caricature they could all understand. Ethan never corrected them. He just smiled for the cameras, hand in hand with Clara, basking in the glow of public approval. Nia watched it all in silence. She didn't post. She didn't defend herself. She just promised quietly, "They'll all see one day who you really are." She didn't know when. She didn't know how. But she knew this, she would rise again. And when she did, she wouldn't need to say a word. He would see her, and regret would do all the talking. The news didn't break, it exploded. One morning, Nia's phone buzzed relentlessly. Dozens of missed calls, hundreds of messages. Her social media notifications flooded like a dam had burst. When she opened the first text, a screenshot from Leona, her stomach dropped. Billionaire tech mogul Ethan Caldwell and new love Clara Whitmore spotted vacationing in the Maldives. Ex-wife reacts badly. Underneath the headline were photos, dozens of them. Ethan and Clara walking hand in hand on the beach, champagne in the sun, kissing under palm trees. In one shot, Clara wore the same gold bracelet Nia once received for her anniversary. Her throat tightened. Her chest felt heavy, like all the air had been sucked from the room. She scrolled further, and there it was, her name. Sources close to Nia Carter claim she's been sending emotional messages to Caldwell since their split. Friends describe her as volatile and bitter. "Friends," she whispered, shaking her head. "What friends?" Her cousin Leona called seconds later. "Girl, don't read that mess," Leona said breathlessly. "They're twisting everything." "They're saying I'm stalking him," Nia said quietly. "Because he's controlling the story," Leona replied. "You know how this works. White billionaire, black ex-wife. Guess who people believe?" Nia closed her eyes. "He told them things about me, Leona." Private things. There was a pause. Then Leona said softly, "He's protecting his image. That man's terrified of losing his investors. So he's letting you take the fall." Nia sat down on the edge of a bed. Her reflection stayed back from the TV screen across the room. She wasn't crying. Not yet. "Leona," she whispered, "they're calling me unstable." "Let them talk," Leona said. "You don't owe them silence anymore." But Nia hung up. She couldn't listen. She felt her world shrinking with every post, every tweet, every cruel comment. Her inbox filled with strangers' opinions about her life. She needs help. She looks like trouble. She should be grateful he ever married her. She thought heartbreak was the worst pain in the world, until she learned what it felt like to be publicly dissected. The betrayal didn't just come from Ethan. It came from the entire machine that decided her story for her. Days later, she went grocery shopping for the first time since the headlines. She wore sunglasses and a hoodie, hoping to blend in. But whispers followed her through the aisles. "That's her. Isn't that the one he left?" She looked so angry. At the checkout, the cashier gave her a pitying smile. "Keep your head up, sweetheart." Nia forced a nod and left, clutching her bag like a shield. When she got home, she found reporters parked across the street. Cameras waiting. Lights flashing. One of them shouted, "Nia, any comment on Ethan's new engagement?" She froze. Engagement. She checked her phone, and there it was. A brand new headline. Ethan Caldwell and Clara Whitmore engaged. Love after scandal. Her heart pounded. He'd wasted no time. They'd turned her into a punchline. That night, Ethan's representative went on a talk show. "Mr. Caldwell has moved on respectfully," the rep said smoothly. Unfortunately, his ex-wife struggled with a divorce. He wishes her well. Struggled. The word stabbed her like a knife. He painted her grief as instability, her love as obsession, and the world nodded along. The next morning, she found her face on gossip blogs, thumbnails captioned, "Crazy ex-wife meltdown." A clip circulated online, a video of her from months ago, yelling at Ethan outside their building. She'd been begging him not to lie to her. But in this edit, with no context, she looked hysterical. Comments poured in. "She's aggressive. She's proving him right. She needs to move on." No one saw what came before that video. Ethan standing stone-faced, dismissing her pain like it was noise. He was calm, she was emotional, and that was all people needed to pick a side. The double standard burned deep. By the end of the week, her landlord slipped a notice under her door, "Late rent again." Clients quietly stopped hiring her for design work. The world believed she was toxic. When Leona called again, Nia didn't answer. She couldn't. Words didn't fit anymore. She turned off her phone, shut her blinds, and sat in the quiet. For the first time in her life, Nia understood what it meant to be invisible, not unseen, but erased. A few days later, there was a knock at her door. It was her mother, Evelyn, small, fierce, and tired of watching her daughter suffer. "Baby, open up." Nia hesitated before unlocking it. Her mother stepped in, arms already open. Nia fell into them, trembling. "He's marrying her, Mama." Evelyn stroked her hair. "Let him. You can't compete with lies. The truth will outlive them both." "I don't want revenge," Nia whispered. "I just want peace." Her mother looked into her eyes. "Then stop fighting to be understood by people who want you broken." Nia nodded weakly, tears falling for the first time in days. That night, she deleted all her social media. She packed away photos, jewelry, anything that still carried his fingerprints. She found the red dress in her closet again, the one Ethan had hated, and laid it on the bed. It reminded her that somewhere under the humiliation, she was still herself. When she looked at her reflection, she barely recognized the woman staring back. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something else, the quiet start of resolve. She spoke to herself softly, like reciting a prayer. "You can bury me under lies, but I will rise in truth." Then she turned off the lights and let the silence fill the room. Weeks passed. The world moved on. New scandals replaced hers. Ethan and Clara's engagement became yesterday's news. But Nia didn't resurface. She didn't post or explain or seek sympathy. She disappeared completely. Friend tried to reach her, but she stayed quiet. She spent her days journaling, walking, thinking, healing, piece by piece. She wrote letters she never sent. One to Ethan, one to Clara, one to herself. To Ethan, she wrote, "You built your empire on my belief in you. I hope it keeps you warm when the truth gets cold." To Clara, "One day, you'll realize you can't trust a man who rewrites his past." To herself, "You survived being blamed for someone else's sins. That makes you dangerous, because now you know your worth." Months later, she left Atlanta quietly. No announcement, no closure. She packed her few belongings into her old car and drove south until the city skyline disappeared in her rearview mirror. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew what she was leaving behind: the pain, the headlines, the cage of other people's opinions. In the passenger seat sat her leather journal, filled with words she hadn't planned to share. But somewhere deep down, she felt a seed of purpose take root. Maybe one day, those words would mean something. Maybe one day, they would speak for every woman silenced by shame. For now, though, Nia just drove into the horizon, into peace, into the beginning of her becoming. And as the city lights faded behind her, so did the name Ethan Caldwell. 6 months passed before anyone heard Nia Carter's name again. She'd settled in a small coastal town in North Carolina, the kind of place where strangers waved and gossip moved slower than the tides. It was quiet, safe, almost invisible, and that's exactly what she needed. Her days were simple. Mornings began with cheap coffee and long walks by the water. Afternoons were spent waiting tables at a diner off the highway. Nights were spent alone, writing in her journal until sleep came. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Still, some nights, the silence felt too loud. One evening, she stood outside the diner after closing, apron still tied, watching the cars rush by. The salty air brushed against her face, but her mind was far away, replaying everything she'd lost. She whispered to herself, "I used to have a driver, a house, a husband. Now I have tips and blisters." The owner, Mrs. Gaines, appeared at the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. She was an older black woman with kind eyes and a voice that carried truth. "You okay, baby?" Nia forced a smile. "Just thinking." "Thinking can be dangerous if you ain't feeding it the right thoughts," Mrs. Gaines said gently. "Go home and rest. Tomorrow's another day." Nia nodded, untied her apron, and walked home to her one-room apartment. The walls were thin, the paint chipped, but it was hers. She sat by the small desk near the window and opened her journal. The pages were filled with raw thoughts, half poems, half confessions. She wrote every night like it was oxygen. "Tonight," she wrote, "I keep waiting for someone to apologize for what they did to me. But maybe peace isn't something given. Maybe it's something I take back myself." The next morning, she brought her journal to a cafe before work. She liked the smell of roasted beans and the sound of people living normal lives. A young man beside her noticed her handwriting. "You a writer?" he asked, smiling politely. Nia chuckled. "No, just trying to remember who I am." He nodded like he understood. "Sometimes that's harder than writing the book." She smiled faintly and closed the notebook. But his words stayed with her. That night, after work, she reread her journal from the beginning. Every page was a wound, but also a witness. It wasn't just her pain, it was her truth. She whispered aloud, "Maybe someone else needs to hear this too." A few days later, she typed one of her journal entries into her old laptop and posted it anonymously on a women's forum under the title The Ex-Wife Diaries. It was a story about betrayal, silence, and how people believe the loudest liar. She didn't name Ethan, but every word dripped with truth. She expected nothing. But the next morning, the post had thousands of views. Comments flooded in. One said, "This sounds like my life." Another, "Thank you for writing what I couldn't say." And another, "We see you. Keep writing." For the first time in months, Nia felt seen. Not as Ethan's ex-wife, but as herself. Still, her practical side whispered, "Don't get carried away." She kept going to work, paying rent, staying small. But her words didn't stay small. Within weeks, her post began trending. Readers called her writing raw, powerful, and fearless. Someone even created a fan page for the ex-wife diaries. When Leona finally tracked her down through email, her message read, "Girl, please tell me this viral writer is you." Nia smiled at the screen but didn't answer. She wasn't ready yet. At the diner, Mrs. Gaines noticed her newfound lightness. "You got a secret, Nia?" she asked one afternoon. Nia shrugged, "Just learning to breathe again." "Good," Mrs. Gaines said. "Keep breathing. But don't just survive, baby. Live." Those words hit deep. One Sunday, Nia took a long drive along the coast. The sky stretched wide, endless and blue. She rolled down her window and let the wind mess up her hair. She spoke to the air like an old friend. "You hear that, Ethan? I'm still here." That night, she wrote her most honest piece yet. "They told me to be quiet, so I screamed with my silence. They called me bitter, so I became brave. They erased me, so I wrote myself back." The post broke the internet. Influencers shared it. Podcasts quoted it. Women tagged their friends saying, "Read this. This is us." Nia didn't post for 3 days after that. She just watched the world finally echo her truth. Then one afternoon, an email arrived from a major black-owned publishing company in New York. The subject line read, "Would like to talk about a book deal." Her hand trembled as she opened it. The message was short and warm. "Your voice matters. We'd be honored to help you tell your story." For the first time in years, Nia cried, not from pain, but from release. She called Leona immediately. "Girl, I got an offer," she said, barely breathing. Leona screamed through the phone. "What? For what?" "For my writing," Nia said. "For my story." Leona laughed between tears. "You see, God don't play about his daughters." Nia wiped her eyes. "It doesn't fix everything." "No," Leona said softly, "but it's a start." Over the next few weeks, Nia worked every spare minute. She wrote before shifts, after shifts, sometimes until dawn. The book was part memoir, part manifesto, an unflinching look at love, race, and the cost of silence. The publisher loved it. When the first check arrived, she didn't buy anything extravagant. She cleared her debts, bought groceries without counting dollars, and upgraded her old car to a used Bentley that ran like a dream. When Mrs. Gaines saw it, she laughed. "You sure you don't want to buy the diner instead?" Nia smiled. "No, I just want to drive my freedom." But beneath her calm, she still carried one unfinished chapter, Ethan. One evening, while editing her manuscript, she saw his name trending online again. Her heart tightened instinctively. The headline read, "Billionaire Ethan Caldwell to marry Clara Whitmore in private ceremony." She stayed at it for a long time. This was a man who'd broken her, lied about her, erased her, and now he was walking into a new life, unscathed. For a moment, bitterness rose, then faded. She whispered to herself, "You can't disgrace what's already been reborn." Then she closed the laptop and looked out the window. The sunset painted the sky in streaks of gold and red, the same colors as the dress waiting in her closet. She smiled faintly. Red always looked better on me anyway. Later that night, she wrote one final journal entry before bed. Sometimes God lets them build the stage just so you can make your entrance. She closed the book, exhaled deeply, and turned off the light. Tomorrow, she would start planning a trip. Not to hide, but to attend a wedding. And this time, she wouldn't be the story people whispered about. She'd be the story they'd never forget. Nia woke before dawn, light sliding across her face through the blinds. It took a moment to remember where she was. Her own small apartment above the bookstore, the sound of seagulls outside, the hum of a town that finally felt like peace. She had coffee, checked her email, and stared at the newest message from her editor. "Your pre-orders are climbing. Interviews want you. Think about what kind of public face you want. This book is bigger than you imagine." She set the mug down carefully. It still felt strange, this new version of her life. The same woman who once hid from headlines was now the headline. Her book, The Ex-Wife Diaries, had gone from anonymous blog to national conversation. When she went downstairs later, the owner of the bookstore, a man named Curtis, waved her over. "You got mail again," he said. "Fan letters. They keep coming." He pointed at a box overflowing with envelopes. Nia laughed softly. "People still write letters. Only when you hit them in the soul," Curtis said. "You hit a lot of souls, Ms. Carter." She carried the box upstairs and opened a few while eating toast. One from Detroit said, "You gave me courage to leave." Another from Dallas read, "They called me angry too. You made me proud of it." She held them to her chest for a moment, breathing slow. Every line reminded her that the pain had meant something. That afternoon, she joined a video meeting with her editor, a sharp, smiling woman named Raina Lewis. "The book tour's shaping up," Raina said. "Essence wants an exclusive interview. And there's a morning show request from New York. You ready for that?" Nia hesitated. "Ready enough." Raina's eyes softened. "You don't owe anyone perfection, Nia. Just tell the truth the way you always have." When the call ended, Nia sat still for a long time. She remembered how Ethan once told her she'd never handle fame, that she was too sensitive for the spotlight. The thought made her smile now, not from bitterness but clarity. That night she called Leona. "Guess what?" Nia said. "You're going on TV." "2 shows, actually." Leona screamed. "Girl, I told you. The same world that watched you fall is about to watch you rise." Nia laughed. "It still feels unreal." "Good. Stay humble, but don't you dare shrink. You're not the villain anymore. You're the voice." A few weeks later, she flew to New York for her first interview. The studio lights were bright, but she felt calm sitting across from the host. They spoke about pain, race, love, and forgiveness. Then the host asked, "If Ethan Caldwell is watching right now, what would you want to say?" For a heartbeat, the room went silent. Cameras waited. Nia smiled faintly. "I'd tell him thank you, because without his lies, I might never have learned the power of my truth." The audience erupted in applause. The clip went viral within hours. Millions of views, hashtags, think pieces. Some called her an inspiration. Others called her dangerous. Both felt right. Back in her hotel room that evening, she scrolled through messages until she saw one from an unknown address. "Proud of you. Didn't expect this." She stayed at it, unreadable, then deleted it without replying. Over the next month, her life changed again. Book signings sold out. Her face appeared on magazine covers. She was invited to panels about feminism and race in media. Every time someone asked how she survived humiliation, she answered simply, "By remembering who I was before they told me what I wasn't." But even in triumph, echoes of the past remained. Reporters tried to bait her into naming Ethan outright. She refused. "It's not about one man," she said. "It's about the system that lets some men's mistakes become women's reputations." Each answer made her stronger, sharper, freer. One evening, after a reading in D.C., an older woman approached her. "You remind me of my daughter," she said, eyes glistening. "She went through something similar. Didn't make it. But you're giving voice to the ones who can't speak." Nia's throat tightened. She hugged the woman gently. "Then she's speaking through me." Later, in the quiet of her hotel room, she sat by the window watching the city lights. Her phone buzzed, a news notification. "Caldwell Whitmore wedding this weekend." She stared at the headline, expression unreadable. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she whispered, "So it's time." She opened her closet and looked at the red dress hanging there. She had kept it pressed and ready, half as memory, half as prophecy. She ran her hand over the fabric, thinking about the girl who once wore it with doubt and the woman who would wear it now with purpose. The next day she called Leona again. "I'm going," she said. Leona nearly dropped the phone. "To his wedding? You're serious?" "I'm not crashing it," Nia said softly. "I was invited, remember?" Leona's voice dropped. "Girl, that invite was a trap." "Maybe once," Nia replied. "But now it's my stage." Leona exhaled loudly. "Fine, but if you're showing up, you better walk in like royalty." Nia smiled. "I was born that way." In the days leading up to the wedding, the internet buzzed about her. Some wondered if she'd attend. Others begged her not to give Ethan the satisfaction. She ignored it all. Instead, She focused on finishing the final edit of her audiobook. When she reached the last line, I stopped waiting for an apology and built my own piece instead. She closed the laptop and whispered, "I'm in." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and warm. Nia dressed slowly, deliberately. The red gown fit perfectly, hugging every curve she once tried to hide. She pinned her curls up, painted her lips, and looked in the mirror. The reflection staring back was everything Ethan said she couldn't be. Elegant, unbothered, radiant. She packed her signed first edition of the Ex-Wife Diaries into her purse. A small gift, a quiet statement. Downstairs, the valet opened the door to her Bentley. It wasn't new, but it gleamed, polished like pride itself. As she slid into the driver's seat, a neighbor called from the steps, "You going somewhere fancy, Miss Nia?" She smiled through the window. Something like that. The drive to Atlanta took hours, each mile peeling away the last remnants of fear. She replayed old memories, Ethan's first compliment, his first lie, her last tear, and let each one dissolve into nothing. By the time the city skyline appeared, her heart was steady. That evening she checked into a hotel near the wedding venue, a sprawling estate glittering with money and pretense. Reporters swarmed outside the gates, snapping photos of arriving guests. She watched from a distance, unseen. In her room, she poured a glass of water, set it on the table, and whispered to her reflection, "Tomorrow isn't about him. It's about me." She thought again of all the women who had written her letters, who saw their reflections in her story. She owed them strength. She owed herself closure. Before bed, she opened her journal, now nearly full, and wrote, "He built a stage for my humiliation. I will walk it as my runway." She closed the book, turned off the lamp, and lay in the dark. For the first time since her marriage ended, sleep came easily. The world had once known her as the woman Ethan Caldwell betrayed. Tomorrow, they would know her as something else entirely. As dawn approached, light crept through the window. Nia stirred, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Let's begin again." The morning of the wedding arrived like a dare. Atlanta was buzzing, reporters in position, drones circling the Caldwell estate, guests dripping with wealth and curiosity. But miles away, in a quiet hotel room, Nia Carter sat at her vanity, applying lipstick with calm precision. She had slept peacefully, the kind of sleep that comes only after years of chaos finally end. Her phone buzzed. Leona's name flashed. "You sure you want to do this, girl?" Leona asked without even saying hello. Nia smiled faintly. "It's not about him anymore. It's about me walking into the fire and not burning." Leona exhaled loudly, then walking slow enough for everyone to see. "Trust me," Nia said. "They'll see." She hung up, slipped on gold earrings that once belonged to her grandmother, and smoothed her hand over the red silk gown. Every movement was deliberate, queen-like. She'd been humiliated, mocked, erased. Now she would be remembered. At the door, she caught her reflection one last time. "You survived the worst," she whispered to herself. "Now shine." The Bentley purred to life beneath her hands, sleek and powerful. The drive to the Caldwell estate was lined with luxury cars, Rolls-Royces, limousines, a parade of privilege. But none of them drew more attention than the crimson Bentley that pulled up just before the ceremony began. When Nia stepped out, conversation stopped. The crowd of guests turned, eyes widening. Some gasped, others whispered. A few phones discreetly lifted to record. She moved slowly, every step grounded, her heels clicking against the marble like punctuation marks to a statement years in the making. A man near the gate whispered, "That's her, the ex-wife." Another said, "She came in a Bentley." Yes, she did. Nia's posture didn't falter. Her chin was high, her gaze unwavering. She wasn't there to blend in. She was there to be seen, fully, beautifully, unapologetically. At the entrance, an usher stuttered, "And Miss Carter, welcome." She smiled politely. "Thank you. Please show me to my seat." Inside, the ceremony was a picture of extravagance. White roses everywhere, chandeliers glittering like frozen rain. The guests were a sea of pale silk and practiced smiles. Nia walked down the aisle of stairs until she reached around near the front. Then Ethan turned. For a heartbeat, the entire room froze. He looked almost exactly as she remembered. Polished, handsome, confident. But the confidence cracked for just a moment when his eyes met hers. He blinked, unsure if she was real. Beside him, Clara's grip on his arm tightened. Nia gave a small, serene nod, then sat gracefully. Her movements were so composed that it unnerved everyone watching. The ceremony began. The officiant's words floated through the air, but Nia barely heard them. Her attention was on Ethan's eyes. Every time he glanced at her, his voice faltered. When he said, "I do," she caught it, the flicker of regret, the ghost of memory. After the vows, as guests rose for applause, whispers rippled through the room. "Did you see her dress? She looks like the main character. Clara looks nervous." Nia smiled to herself. She hadn't spoken a word, yet somehow, she controlled the room. At the reception, she made her way through the crowd with quiet poise. Waiters offered champagne. She accepted one glass, sipping slowly. Near the grand staircase, she overheard two women gossiping. "I can't believe he invited her," one whispered. "He probably thought she couldn't afford to come," the other replied. "Look at her now. She came richer than half the room." Nia's lips curved. She moved on, letting the words roll off her like perfume. Eventually, she spotted Ethan across the ballroom, surrounded by investors and friends. He kept glancing at her between forced laughs. Clara stood beside him, visibly tense. When their eyes met again, Nia crossed the floor with calm, deliberate grace. "Ethan," she said softly when she reached him. He turned fully toward her, clearing his throat. "Nia, you look alive," she finished, tilting her head slightly. He blinked. "Beautiful." She nodded once. "Thank you. Congratulations." Clara forced a smile. "It's nice to see you here." Nia met her gaze evenly. "I'm sure it is." The air between them was electric, polite words layered over buried history. Ethan tried to regain control. "I wasn't expecting you to actually come." "I know," Nia said simply. "But you invited me. It would have been rude not to." His jaw tightened. "You didn't have to make an entrance." She smiled gently. "Oh, Ethan, I didn't make an entrance. You made a mistake." For a moment, his mask slipped. The people around them sensed the tension and drifted away, pretending not to listen. Nia took a slow sip of champagne, her eyes steady on his. "You know, I used to think walking away was weakness. But sometimes, silence is the loudest revenge." Ethan swallowed. "Is that what this is? Revenge?" "No," she said. "This is peace. You should try it sometime." Then she handed him a small wrapped box. He frowned. "What's this?" "A gift," she said. "For you and your wife." He opened it slowly. Inside was a signed copy of her book, The Ex-Wife Diaries. The dedication read, "To Ethan, the lesson, not the loss." He stared at it, speechless. Clara's face drained of color as she realized the truth. "You wrote this," she whispered. "You're the one everyone's been talking about." Nia's smile was kind but sharp. "I was always the one, Clara. People just forgot for a while." She turned to leave, but Ethan grabbed her wrist gently. "Nia, wait." She looked down at his hand, then up into his eyes. "Don't touch me. You don't get to anymore." He released her immediately, voice unsteady. "I never meant to hurt you." "You didn't mean not to," she said. "And that's the same thing." With that, she walked away, the red gown trailing like fire behind her. Guests parted as she passed, a queen reclaiming her throne. Outside, flashbulbs exploded as photographers rushed forward. "Miss Carter, over here. Are you here to reconcile with Mr. Caldwell?" She stopped, turned slightly toward the cameras, and smiled. Soft, elegant, devastating. "No," she said. "I came to congratulate him." "On what?" one reporter shouted. Her gaze flicked toward the estate. "On teaching me everything I needed to unlearn." Then she slid into her Bentley, closed the door, and drove off as murmurs filled the night. Back inside, Ethan stood motionless, staring at the book in his hands. Clara's voice trembled. "You should have never invited her." He didn't answer. He was still reading the dedication over and over. Outside, Nia merged onto the highway, city lights flashing past. She exhaled deeply, her reflection in the rearview mirror calm, powerful, free. She whispered to herself, "They thought I came to watch their story, but I came to end mine." The night swallowed her car in gold and red streaks as she disappeared into the city, leaving behind whispers, regret, and the ghost of a man who finally realized the cost of underestimating a woman who refused to stay broken. By morning, the world was on fire again. The video of Nia Carter stepping out of that red Bentley had spread across every corner of the internet. Someone had filmed her brief exchange with Ethan and Clara, and now the clip was everywhere, looping on social media, dissected by talk shows, captioned by strangers who thought they knew her story. Ex-wife arrives at Billionaire's wedding in a Bentley. That's how you do closure. The way she said, "I came to congratulate him," queen behavior. She didn't crash the wedding. She completed it. Nia woke to hundreds of messages. "Hi editor, Raina was first. Raina, you're trending. Again. And not just your book. You." Everyone's connecting the dots. Nia blinked at her phone. Her heart pounded. The secret she'd guarded, the fact that she was the author behind the ex-wife diaries, was no longer a secret. Another message came through from Leona. "Leona, girl, the world finally knows who you are, and they are rooting for you." But before she could process the flood of support, a different kind of storm began. Reporters dug into Ethan's history, matching details from Nia's book to moments in his life. By noon, a headline blazed across national news. Best-selling author of the ex-wife diaries confirmed as Ethan Caldwell's ex-wife. Nia stayed at her screen, breath caught between disbelief and release. She hadn't planned this exposure. She wanted closure, not a spectacle. But life had a way of turning truth into fireworks. Her phone rang again, Raina's voice urgent but thrilled. "Nia, this is bigger than we imagined. You've ignited a cultural moment. They are calling you the voice of black womanhood in modern America." Nia exhaled. "I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to be free." Raina paused. "Then be both." By afternoon, talk shows debated her story. Commentators dissected the racial dynamics, the double standards, the hypocrisy. Some still defended Ethan, calling him misunderstood, a victim of cancel culture. But the tide had turned. This time, people saw through the charm. On social media, women shared their own stories under a new hashtag, #ExWifeDiaries. It spread fast. Teachers, nurses, artists, mothers, thousands of women writing about betrayal, resilience, and rebirth. In one post, a woman wrote, "He called me angry. She called me strong. Thank you, Nia." Nia sat in her hotel room, scrolling through the flood of messages, feeling her eyes fill with tears. She wasn't alone anymore. That evening, the news aired footage from the wedding. A clip showed Ethan looking stunned as he read her book inscription. To Ethan, the lesson, not the loss. The anchor said, while Caldwell's PR team declines comment, sources claim his investors are reconsidering partnerships amid the scandal. Ethan's empire was cracking, not from revenge, but from truth. Around midnight, there was a knock on Nia's hotel door. When she opened it, Ethan stood there. He looked nothing like the man who once stood at the altar, his tie loosened, eyes heavy with regret. "Nia," he said softly, "can we talk?" She crossed her arms. "It's late. You should be with your wife." She left, he admitted quietly. She saw the interviews, the comments. She said she couldn't live under your shadow. Nia studied him, unimpressed. "My shadow? Ethan, I spent years living in yours." He took a step closer. "I didn't know it would go this far. The book, the attention." She cut him off. "You mean the truth?" He sighed. "You've ruined me." Nia's voice didn't waver. "No, Ethan. You did that when you thought a black woman's silence would protect your reputation." He swallowed. "I loved you, you know." She tilted her head. "Maybe, but you didn't respect me. And love without respect is just ownership." He looked away, ashamed. "They're calling me a racist now." "Then maybe you should ask yourself why that fits so easily," she replied. He winced. then whispered, I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't mean to get caught, she said. He had no answer. After a long pause, Nia added quietly, I forgave you already. But forgiveness doesn't mean welcome back. Ethan's shoulders dropped. You're really done with me, aren't you? She nodded slowly. I was done the day you let the world call me crazy and said nothing. This, she gestured between them, is just your delayed realization. For a moment, he stood in silence. Then he said softly, You won. Nia shook her head. There were no winners. There were lessons. He nodded faintly, then turned to leave. At the door, he looked back. You really came in that Bentley just to prove a point, didn't you? She smiled. No, I came because I could. After he left, she sank onto the couch, exhaling deeply. Her heart didn't ache anymore. It was still, steady, whole. The next morning, Raina called again. Every outlet wants an interview. CNN, The View, you name it. You ready for your next chapter? Nia smiled faintly. Yeah, I think I am. That afternoon, she posted a message to her millions of new followers. The truth always comes dressed as courage. Thank you for letting me speak mine. For every woman who's been silenced, your voice is not gone. It's waiting. #ex-wife diaries. The post went viral instantly. Later that evening, she sat on her balcony watching the city lights. Leona called again, her voice bubbling with excitement. Girl, you know they're talking about making a movie out of your book. Nia laughed. A movie? Who would play me? Somebody fierce, Leona said. Somebody who knows how to rise from ashes. They both laughed until the moment softened into quiet. Leona's tone turned gentle. You proud of yourself yet? Nia thought for a moment. I'm proud I didn't let them define me. Outside, a gentle breeze brushed against her face. She whispered, I'm finally free, Leona. Good, Leona said softly. You deserve peace more than applause. When the call ended, Nia leaned back, watching the skyline flicker. The world finally knew her truth. But more importantly, so did she. A week later, a magazine cover hit newsstands. Nia Carter, the woman who rewrote the narrative. Underneath was a quote from her interview. They called me angry, but I was just awake. Ethan's company, once the pride of tech media, began to crumble. Sponsors withdrew. Stock prices fell. In one final twist, Clara filed for divorce barely 2 months after their wedding, citing irreconcilable dishonesty. The public didn't need Nia to say a word. The truth had its own voice now. Back at home, Nia opened a fresh journal and wrote on the first page. The lesson: you cannot destroy a woman who built herself from the ruins. Then she closed the book, smiled to herself, and turned off her phone. She had no need to chase the noise. She'd already won the silence. And this time, it was hers. The noise faded faster than Nia expected. Within months, the world had moved on to the next scandal, the next celebrity apology, the next trending heartbreak. But for the first time in years, Nia didn't mind being forgotten. Peace didn't need witnesses. She moved back to the coast where her quiet life had begun again, renting a small house by the water. Mornings were slower now. Coffee on the porch, bare feet in the sand, seagulls arguing in the distance. She didn't check her phone the moment she woke. She didn't chase validation. The fame had been strange while it lasted. Interviews, applause, awards. It all felt like living in a glass box. But peace felt real, ordinary, holy. Her phone rang one morning. It was Raina, her editor. Your paperback release sold out nationwide, Raina said. They want another round of media appearances. Maybe a second book. Nia smiled gently. Maybe one day. But not yet. Right now, I just want to breathe. I figured you'd say that, Raina replied, laughing softly. Enjoy it, Nia. You earned it. After hanging up, Nia closed her laptop and walked down to the water. The wind was warm, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. She let the waves lap at her feet and whispered, I did earn it. Later that week, she visited her mother in Atlanta. Evelyn opened the door before Nia even knocked. Look at you, her mother said, pulling her into a hug. You've got light in your eyes again. Nia laughed. It's peace, Mama. Looks good on me, huh? Her mother smiled knowingly. Looks like you stopped carrying everyone else's guilt. Over dinner, they talked about small things, the neighbors, the garden, the new church choir. But eventually, Evelyn reached across the table and said, "You forgave him, didn't you?" Nia hesitated. "I did. Not for him. For me." Her mother nodded slowly. "That's the only kind that lasts." Evelyn leaned back, studying her daughter. "You know what your daddy used to say? You can't control how they treat you, but you can control whether you let it define you." "I see now. You figured that out." Nia smiled softly. "Took me a while, but yeah, I finally got there." After dinner, she walked through her old neighborhood. Kids played on the sidewalk, music spilled from windows, and the city smelled like fried food and resilience. A teenage girl recognized her and ran up, holding a worn copy of the Ex-Wife Diaries. "Miss Nia, I love your book," she said breathlessly. "You made me feel like I ain't crazy for wanting more." Nia knelt to meet her eyes. "You're not crazy. You're just awake." The girl smiled shyly. "You think I can be like you one day?" Nia's answer came easily. "No, baby. Be like you. That's better." She signed the girl's book, hugged her, and watched her run off, heart full. That night, Nia couldn't sleep. She sat on her mother's porch, looking out at the stars. The old wounds felt far away now, more like faded scars than open cuts. She whispered to herself, "You did it. You really made it out." The next day, she visited an old community center she used to volunteer at before her marriage. The director, Ms. Palmer, greeted her with tears in her eyes. "Lord, if it isn't the Phoenix herself." Nia laughed. "You still calling people out, huh?" Ms. Palmer chuckled. "Only the ones who rise from ashes. You here to help again?" Nia nodded. "I want to start something. A scholarship, maybe, for young black women who've been written off, like I once was." Ms. Palmer smiled wide. "I knew that fire in you wasn't just for burning bridges." They spent hours sketching ideas on scrap paper. By evening, the Carter Foundation for Resilient Women had a name, a mission, and a future. Back home, Nia typed out the proposal and sent it to Raina. Within days, donations poured in. Women who had once written her letters now wrote checks, paying it forward. One morning, she got a message from an unfamiliar number. "Your foundation inspired me. I'm funding an internship program in your name." Nia didn't have to ask who it was. Leona always moved in silence. She smiled and texted back, "You never stopped believing in me." Leona replied, "Because I knew you were never the villain they said you were." Weeks passed. The foundation grew. Nia gave her first speech at a local college, standing before a room of young women who listened with tears in their eyes. She told them, "Don't let their definitions become your reflection. You don't owe the world your silence to keep it comfortable." The room erupted in applause. After the event, a journalist approached her. "You've turned your pain into purpose. What keeps you grounded now?" Nia thought for a moment. Gratitude, and remembering that peace isn't the absence of noise, it's learning which voices matter. That night, alone in her house by the sea, she wrote in her journal again. "I used to think revenge would heal me. But healing isn't loud. It's quiet, consistent, and kind. It's choosing softness after surviving hardness." She closed the book and smiled. The red Bentley sat parked outside, its paint still gleaming. It wasn't a trophy anymore. It was a reminder that even the things meant to mock her had become symbols of victory. A few days later, an invitation arrived in the mail, a gala celebrating influential women in media. Her name was listed among the honorees. She called her mother. "You want to come with me, Mama?" Evelyn laughed. "I'll have to find something that matches your glow." At the event, the crowd gave Nia a standing ovation as she accepted her award. She looked out at the faces before her, black, white, brown, young, old, and spoke from her heart. "I stand here not as someone who never broke, but as someone who rebuilt. Every story of survival starts with loss. Mine just happened to be public. But you don't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes your existence, your refusal to disappear, is the revolution." The audience rose again, clapping, cheering, some crying. Afterward, She stood outside the venue for a while, staring up at the night sky. Her publicist asked if she wanted to give one last interview. Nia shook her head. No more talking. Tonight I just want to feel it. She climbed into her Bentley, closed her eyes, and let the hum of the engine calm her. In the rearview mirror, she saw her own reflection. Not the angry woman the media once framed, not the heartbroken ex-wife, but the version of herself she'd fought to become. She whispered, "You made it home." And she meant it. As she drove away, she passed a billboard with her own face on it, the cover of her book, tagline underneath, "The truth always finds its voice." She smiled, whispering softly to herself, and mine's finally at peace. The waves crashed faintly in the distance as she disappeared into the night. The woman who once came to a wedding for closure now driving toward a life that no longer needed any. The invitation to the New York Book Awards came printed on silver stock, elegant enough to frame. Nia kept it on her kitchen counter for a week before deciding to go. It wasn't about trophies anymore. It was about walking into a room that once would have closed its doors to her. On the night of the ceremony, she wore a cream suit instead of a gown, sharp and calm. No armor, no glitter, just power tailored to her skin. When she arrived, cameras flashed, but she smiled easily this time. The noise no longer reached her bones. Inside, the host announced nominees for Memoir of the Year. When they read the ex-wife diaries, the audience cheered like it was already hers. Still, she sat quietly, hands folded in her lap. If she won, fine. If she didn't, that was fine too. She had already reclaimed something greater than applause. And the award goes to Nia Carter. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she rose, steady, and walked to the stage. The crowd rose with her. She accepted the glass plaque and leaned into the microphone. "I wrote this book because silence almost killed me," she said. "Not the quiet kind, but the kind that happens when the world decides your pain is inconvenient. Tonight, I stand for every woman told she's too loud, too dark, too much. We are none of those things. We are just enough." The audience erupted. Cameras flashed. But as the lights hit her face, she didn't think of fame. She thought of the girl who once sat in a one-room apartment, holding a gold invitation that felt like an insult. That girl had made it here. After the ceremony, she slipped outside for air. The city pulsed around her. Horns, laughter, the smell of roasted nuts from a street cat. A man's voice came from behind her. "Nia." She turned. Ethan stood there in a dark coat, thinner than before, eyes dull with sleeplessness. For a second, she thought it was a ghost. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly. "I saw your interview on the news. I had to see you." She crossed her arms. "You've seen enough of me for one lifetime." He looked down. "My company's gone. Investors pulled out. Clara took the rest. I sold the house. I'm starting over." She nodded once. "That makes two of us, though we started from very different places." He tried to smile. "I read your book again. I think I finally understand it." "I didn't write it for you to understand," she said. "I wrote it so I could survive." He took a step closer, voice small. "Do you hate me?" She studied him for a long moment. "No, hate takes too much energy. I'd rather spend mine living." He swallowed hard. "You really forgive me?" "I forgave you a long time ago," she said. "Forgiveness just means I'm not carrying you anymore." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I'm glad you found peace." "I didn't find it," she replied. "I built it." For the first time, he seemed to see her clearly, not as a memory, not as a symbol, but as a woman who had outgrown the story he wrote her into. He reached out, as if to shake her hand, but stopped halfway. She saved him the embarrassment, extending hers briefly. "Goodbye, Ethan," she said. He squeezed lightly. "Goodbye, Nia." When he turned to leave, she felt no anger, no victory, only release. A journalist waiting nearby approached hesitantly. "Ms. Carter, can I ask what you said to him?" She smiled. "Nothing the world hasn't already learned." The next morning headlines read, "Grace in motion. Nia Carter and ex-husband share quiet moment after her win." The comments were different this time. No ridicule, no mockery, just admiration for how dignity looks when it refuses to perform revenge. Weeks later, she launched her foundation officially in Atlanta. The building was painted coral and white, sunlight pouring through wide windows. Outside, a new sign read, "The Carter House for Resilient Women." Former victims of public shaming, single mothers, students, women came there to learn financial literacy, storytelling, healing. During the opening speech, she said, "They called me broken, but every crack became a window. This place is where light comes through." Applause thundered through the hall. Her mother sat in the front row, smiling through tears. Leona stood beside the stage recording everything, mouthing the words, "You did it." After the ceremony, a young woman approached. "Miss Carter, I was fired after speaking up about harassment. I thought my life was over. Your book made me fight again." Nia took her hands. "Then write your own chapter. You don't need anyone's permission." As the crowd mingled, a delivery man entered with a small package. The label read, "From E. Caldwell." She opened it privately in her office. Inside was her old wedding photo, 2 smiling faces frozen in better times, and a short note. "Thank you for teaching me what love isn't. I'm still learning what it is." She placed the photo in a drawer and the note in the trash. Some lessons didn't need souvenirs. That evening she drove the Bentley along the coast. The sunset stretched wide, bleeding gold across the water. She turned on the headlights and laughed softly to herself. "You tried to bury me," she whispered to the wind, "but all you did was plant me." The car hummed beneath her, smooth and steady, a symbol of every road she'd survived. At home, she poured tea and sat at her desk with a blank notebook. On the first page she wrote, "Book 2, The Rebirth Chronicles." Underneath, she added, "The world met my scars. Now it will meet my joy." Her phone buzzed with a message from Raina. "Raina, Netflix just called. They want to adapt your memoir." Nia laughed aloud. "Nia, let them. But only if the last scene is peace." She closed the laptop, stepped onto her balcony, and looked out at the ocean. The moon reflected off the waves like scattered silver coins. Everything felt full circle. The pain, the growth, the silence turned into song. She thought of the women who had written her, the girl from her old neighborhood, her mother's proud eyes, even Ethan's hollow apology. Every person in her story had pushed her toward this version of herself. Nia whispered, "Thank you for the ruin. It built the foundation." The night air was soft against her face. She breathed it in, slow and sure. As she turned to go inside, she caught her reflection in the glass door, shoulders back, smile calm, eyes clay. Not the woman who came to a wedding to prove something, but the woman who no longer needed to. Before bed, she wrote one final line in her journal. "They called me his mistake, but I became my own masterpiece." She placed the pen down, closed the journal, and turned off the light. The ocean murmured outside like applause fading into quiet. Tomorrow there would be new interviews, new letters, new stories. But tonight belonged only to her, the survivor who refused to stay silent, the woman who rebuilt herself from ash and accusation. She whispered into the darkness, a prayer, a victory, and a promise all at once. "I'm the peace that grew from the storm." And with that, Nia Carter finally slept, not as the ex-wife who was once disgraced, but as the woman who had rewritten her own ending. You saw what happened when she walked into his wedding, but what she does next. Nobody's ready for that. Don't stop now. Tap the next chapter and find out why revenge was only the beginning.